For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, the Lost Chapter. Hey, so Craig, it's, Easter's coming. And I like the multicolored
and the goose
Easter...
is getting fat? Oh,
no,
sorry.
Wrong season.
Wrong
I like the multicolored Easter donut. So I'm going to order one of those.
Like the donut itself is multicolored?
Well, no.
Like
just the frosting. Just the frosting.
Oh, okay.
They don't do egg-shaped donuts.
Yeah.
Hey, wait, is that...
How can you get anything but the chocolate fudge cronut at this point?
Hey, Crystal, what are you doing in Dunkin' Donuts tonight? What the chocolate fudge cronut? Is that your favorite?
You mean you don't go up to strangers in the line at Dunkin' Donuts and tell them what to order? Because that's what I generally do.
I think that's a fabulous technique to meet people.
I think it was a great idea because I'm going to get me a cronut.
Nice. I will get a cronut. Well, Crystal, can I buy you a cronut? Because I want to thank you for all your episodes of Board Game Blitz. I really love that podcast. I think it's wonderful. So will you allow me to buy you a donut?
Take a cronut.
Awesome. So we need 3 cronuts. And what's your drink of choice? Do you like coffees, hot or cold, or tea? Or what do you drink?
The mocha iced coffee is my jam at Dunkin' Donuts.
See,
that's what I get.
A Dunkin' professional. I love it.
Yeah.
We get these people.
She knows whereof she speaks.
We get these people from Canada, like Terrace from Geek Nation Tours, telling us that Tim Hortons is better. And these guys are wrong. I'm just sorry. They're wrong.
Dunkin' is where it's at.
Exactly right, Crystal. Exactly. Well, Crystal, thank you for...
America runs on Dunkin', dare we say.
It does. Maybe Canada doesn't, but by gosh, America does.
As someone who works in marketing for her day job, hearing somebody do something like that it makes my heart swell. It's
there you go. What's your favorite?
That it works,
so, Crystal, what's your favorite marketing slogan you've ever come up with?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I've come up with anything noteworthy.
All right, well, let us know.
I'm not gonna.
Let me get
I'm
back to me.
usually more of the behind the scenes marketing type.
As a professional, what is one of your favorite marketing slogans? Period.
Yeah, there you go.
Ooh, that's a really good one, and I don't know if I have an answer to that.
That's why I'm trying not to put you on the spot. It's just one of the ones you appreciate.
I mean, it's so cliche. But Nike's Just Do It is kind of iconic because it's so good.
It is brilliant.
Like, everybody knows what Nike is. Whether you speak English or not, I think everyone across the world sees that swoop and they instantly know it's Nike. And that speaks to a really good marketing campaign.
That's good branding. You're right.
A very good friend of mine's father came up with Army Be All You Can Be, and it bought him a giant yacht.
That's super awesome.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, Crystal, just one slogan. You're one slogan away from a super giant yacht.
One slogan away from a big old yacht that's going to be completely useless in Las Vegas.
I have always wanted a desert yacht, so that's just
like Jabba, like Jabba the Hutt's yacht, right?
Yes, I need
like a sand barge. Exactly right. I feel like I need one of those. So, do you have a little dog back there? Feed him a donut. Just give him a little donut.
So yes, that is
be fine.
Sterling. He is yelling right now for reasons that I am not certain about.
Awesome. So, we should talk about. Have you guys seen? I just watched Arrival last week with my wife. Have you guys seen this movie?
I have.
Loved Arrival so much.
Excellent. So let's talk about Arrival. Let's have some donuts and coffee here and talk about Arrival. Now, first, we should warn our listeners here that this is going to be spoiler-filled.
We're going to spoil the heck out of this.
And this movie definitely depended on sort of the mystery of what was happening, I would say. Would you say that's fair, Crystal? Is that a fair characterization?
That is definitely... Yeah, no, it's true, because watching the movie the first time is a very different experience than watching it any subsequent viewing.
Yes, kind of like, it's almost like The Sixth Sense. It's got that I see dead people thing going on in the end of it. So
I would say it's more so.
Yeah.
That's got one twist. This has got the whole movie is going to be completely different for you after you've seen it once.
So
the best part is it's still so good more than once.
It is a good film. So if you're interested in enjoying this movie as it was intended, do not listen to this episode. Pause it, go watch Arrival, then come back and see if you agree with us on what we think of this. So what attracted you guys to go watch this movie? Was it the premise of just aliens? Because I'll be frank, when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh God, someone did Contact again. We've already seen that movie once. What drew you guys to the movie?
For me, linguistics is something that interests me. That's why I have an etymology segment on
good
the
point.
podcast.
Hadn't put that together. See, I wasn't thinking that level. That's awesome.
When I saw that they basically, at its heart, that this was a movie about linguistics, I was in. And I'm pretty skeptical of alien movies in general, even though there have been some really good ones over the years. There has been also a lot of not good ones. But I heard it was linguistics, and I was like, I'm in. I don't even care. I want to see it.
Nice. Now, Craig, was that the same for you? Was it the linguistics that got you in there?
No. Actually, it was the fact that my wife likes to see as many of the nominated movies for Best Picture as she can. And when there's a sci-fi one she's willing to watch, I will watch it. So other than that, I was more like just cool. It looks like sci-fi, and Karen will be willing to watch it. So that's why we watched it.
Well, for me, I like all the sci-fi. So one, and two, I like the concept of SETI and the search for extraterrestrial life, and so any movie like that, I generally that's sort of like hard sci-fi, meaning realistic, sci-fi. I find fascinating. So it had me there. I was worried it was going to be a little sappy. So I was nervous about that, but it actually kind of I thought it sidestepped the sappiness pretty okay.
It did something where it became a movie about love, but it wasn't sappy at all. And that's, I think, very difficult to pull off. Yeah,
it's funny because the love story actually never happened in the film. It's sort of interesting.
It's just alluded to.
It just sort of showed up at the end like, "Aw," kind of thing, right? It's like the last 30 seconds. So what did you guys think when you first saw, like, how did the movie draw you in? What did you think about the ships, the look, the main characters, things started happening? What kind of drew you into the film?
For me, they did stuff that is similar to what other sci-fi movies have done, but somehow were able to make it unique enough to make it not necessarily feel like other sci-fi movies when you were watching it. I think especially the design of the alien ships, especially from the outside and the inside, I could not recollect anything that I had seen that looked like those ships before. And because there have been so many sci-fi movies over the years, I think that's a hard thing to pull off. So I thought that was impressive. And the performances by all of the actors and actresses involved were all stellar right from the get-go. Amy Adams, from moment one, kind of had sucked me in and had my attention, and she was just brilliant the whole time.
What'd you think, Craig? What'd you think of the look and feel of it?
I think the look and feel is great. I love sci-fi movies that kind of take the sci-fi aspect as a given, and they don't sort of push your face into it. Obviously, it's an aliens come to Earth movie, so the sci-fi elements aren't universal. It's more of an interface between the spaceships and our society and our technology levels and everything. But I really thought that they did a great job of not only creating the ships and the society that they came from, but also of revealing that to you in sort of a holistic way, so you just kind of get it and it all fits and it seems plausible and real, which when all is said and done is even more amazing considering all the ramifications of what they've come and what they're trying to do.
Absolutely. I think the realism and kind of the natural feel of it probably stems from the fact that it was based on a popular short story that was written in 1998, which I haven't read yet, but I would really like to. It's called Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang. And after I saw the movie, watched some extra content about it. And he actually said something really cool and insightful that resonated pretty heavily with me. Is he was talking about science fiction as a genre, and he said that what most people think to be science fiction isn't exactly how he feels it to be. He said that, and this is a quote from Ted Chiang, the man who wrote the short story, he said, "Science fiction is about using speculative scenarios as a lens to examine the human condition."
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, I was like, wow, that's big and deep and super accurate in a way that I didn't expect.
Oh yeah, I think he's exactly right. And I think my favorite classic sci-fi is all that stuff, right? Like you think about Stranger in a Strange Land, you think about Asimov, you think about, iRobot. Those are all about really what it is to be human, right? But looking at it, and even if you, and I know, Krista, you mentioned on the show before, you like the original series Star Trek. Well, what Gene Roddenberry was doing that original series was he was able to address a lot of modern social issues in 1968, or 1969, at a time where you couldn't put that stuff on television, but he was able to do it, like the first, white and black kiss happened on that show because they were able to do it in a sci-fi setting, and it was, you know what I mean? So interracial kiss. So they were able to do some really cool things, and I think it's great. I think Arrival did some of that as well, which is really neat.
Yeah, they definitely kind of pushed some boundaries, and especially with the dynamics between a mother and a daughter, and what you are willing to do for love, and in a very cool way.
Yeah. So
I like the fact that exactly what you're saying, Crystal, like what the mother and a daughter and what you're willing to do for love. And I like that it didn't give you a clean answer. I mean clearly by the end, but Ian, Jeremy Renner's character, is obviously going to have a very different opinion of what you should have done in that scenario, and it made the characters more real because of this really unrealistic sort of scenario they were put into.
Yeah,
it's. I mean, do you like that? That's an impossible situation to put somebody into. Is that, do you choose love when you know that it's going to end in heartbreak? And
right.
Watching her actively choose to make that decision at the end of the movie is really awesome. And I'm so sorry my dogs are barking.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
It's okay. They're remembering those moments in the film, and they're just really being passionate about it. It's fine.
That's right.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that was my favorite. That's when I felt like it became a real sci-fi movie for some of the things I mentioned. You all mentioned earlier, which is this idea that it was about, in the end, it was about her, right? But before we get to that, Chris, you said you're into linguistics. Did you feel, because the only part of the movie where I sort of had a little bit of a sort of, I came out sort of a cognitive disconnect was, I felt like she was translating some of that stuff pretty quick. Like, did it make sense to you, her progress through the sort of the science of, like in Independence Day, they hack the alien computer from a Macintosh, and everybody's like, how did that even know? So was that moment, was that okay for you? Because I kind of felt like there was a moment where she was like playing with circles, and the next moment she'd sort of figured it out, and I was kind of like,
yeah, it was definitely, the progress was realistic, but not on a realistic timeline. And I think that's where the disconnect, like someone who studies linguistics is going to pick up on a new language faster than an average person because of their knowledge. But like, I think what happened in the movie, which appeared to take place, over maybe a few weeks, probably would easily take months to get from point A to point B, which I'm willing to forgive the sped up timeline for the sake of the movie. But I think what happened was fairly true to life for people who study linguistics and are good with that kind of thing. Aside from like maybe the very end, when she gets transported back up to the alien ship, and she doesn't have the computer screen there helping her translate, and she's kind of just speaking to them one-on-one, that I feel especially was a little bit, kind of out there. Right. But they, in the design of the movie, I read that they did a pretty good job of attempting to create something realistic. Like those symbols that you see during the course of the movie weren't just chosen at random. They did create somewhat of a language, not at the same scale as like Klingon, for instance, which is kind of fully fleshed out at this point. But they created at least the beginnings of this alien language that is unlike anything else that anyone's ever seen before.
So yeah, and I it's funny because I had that problem with I thought she was learning it too fast. But then there's the twist of, well, the language allows you to look at time differently, and she's able to learn from the future. So I started wondering, a little
bit of a stretch of reality, I think.
Right.
Although
maybe, but here's
what's the name of it? There's a theory. the whole crux of this movie is based on a theory that's been widely debunked in linguistics,
right,
for the most part. But that the language that you learn basically affects your perception of life in general, or something along those lines. I could look up the name, but it's super nerdy and nobody cares. But like they're using that theory on a bigger scale, basically, in that concept.
Right, and they're saying that by knowing that language, you can change how you view time, and so she was able to actually see. She's seeing the future, experiencing the future, or whatever, and she's able to get information from the future to save the present, right? And if you can allow for that to happen, then you can almost allow for her to learn it faster, because it's almost like, is she learning enough of it to look ahead into the future to learn more of it? Like, is she kind of like referencing her own brain in the future to know more of it faster? You know what I mean? Because if that language works that way, it almost feels like you can learn it faster once you learned a little bit of it. Does that make sense? I kind of like didn't like it, and then later in the movie I did like it once I was like, oh, she has all the time in the world, because it's like transcending time. You know, it's kind of what happened for me. I don't know if that happened to you guys.
Yeah, she was almost able to control it in some way there toward the end when she was getting the phone number.
Yeah. So, Craig, what did you think about the whole time language situation there?
I liked it. I don't really like time manipulation stories, but the fact that became the center of this whole story was intriguing to me, and I liked the way it was wrapped up in the with General Shang and the Chinese, which I would say. It was okay, and I bought it because you really had to at the end, or you weren't, like, the movie was just going to fall apart for you. And I liked enough of the rest of it to be like, okay, I get it. I think it's neat. And the fact how it wrapped up with Hannah and her daughter, and that reveal, which was very much like a Sixth Sense sort of thing. I think more to my interest or wheelhouse or whatever, I really enjoyed the way the foreign powers were being portrayed, because they didn't take an easy out and be like, oh, well, the Chinese are bad guys. You know, there wasn't that, because when you get down to what was happening, when the translation goes out and everybody thinks that the aliens just said, use the weapon. And, no, you don't have the bad guy foreigner country deciding, well, we're going to use the weapon. And what you have is these countries going, well, we're going to blow you up for trying to turn us against each other, which I thought was a very intriguing flip on what's kind of a trope in stories in general, where the foreigner, the outsider is really going to be set up as the bad guy. I mean, and there was a straw man bad guy that I didn't like, but it was a little minor thing. The main thing that you'd expect, oh, the Chinese are going to be the bad guys, they're going to want to nuke everybody with the weapon, and instead it was more this situation where they had, because of the use the weapon translation, had identified the aliens as being this force that was trying to turn humans against each other, and so they were going to launch a preliminary attack. I thought was a very neat thing, and then that really could only, that sort of went into a corner where time manipulation was really going to be the only way out, which would almost make you think, oh, did they take an easy out? Except that it wasn't, because the entire film is then predicated upon this time manipulation or the time perception aspect of the whole story, which I thought was great when it all came together.
Yeah. So Crystal, what was your favorite part of the film? Like, what really makes you love watching that movie? And it sounds like you've watched it several times now.
Yeah, I bought it on Blu-ray as soon as it came out. The linguistics thing is interesting to me, and the story is great. I think my favorite part was when I realized that Jeremy Renner was her husband, or it was going to be her husband. Right. That moment when you realize that everything that you've seen that you thought was in the past is actually in the future was, I think I sometimes get twists before you're supposed to, and in this case I knew something was up, obviously. Like, I knew that the daughter had some kind of a connection to the story that I didn't quite understand, but I didn't really predict that twist until it happened, and so I loved that a lot. And in subsequent views, it's interesting watching the flash forwards, not just for the content that's in them, but what Amy Adams' character does immediately after having those flash forwards, because on an initial viewing, obviously you think she's reminiscing about the past,
right?
Whereas in fact she's dealing with this problem with the aliens, and she's seeing all this stuff in her head, and she has no understanding or context about it,
right?
And she can't really talk about it, obviously, because it would ruin the twist, but she somehow plays it off in a way that makes sense. Like, she's just genuinely confused and upset, and she doesn't understand it.
Yeah, it was funny because I kind of I half guessed it. So at one point, not early, but in about middle of the movie, they start to make the connection that the language affects your ability to perceive how time works. And right then I was like, oh my God, her kid hasn't been born yet.
Right.
But even though I even leaned to my wife and said the beginning is really the future. But what I didn't figure out, but I still didn't put together, that it wasn't until later that I was like, oh my God, that means she's got to decide whether or not to have a kid that's going to die of cancer when she's young, right? I was like, oh my God, like that whole thing, the impact of what was actually happening in her head and the life decision she had to make was like, oh my God. And then that's why it was so cool that they came back and showed all the happy times she was going to have. And sort of the decision was, are you going to bring a child into the world that you know is going to die of cancer early, yet are you going to deny yourselves all those special moments with that child, right?
Yeah, and not just knowing that the child is going to die, but that at a certain point you have to tell your husband that that's going to happen and that he's going to leave you.
Yes.
Like, all of that, like, her life is going to be decimated, and she still chooses to do it.
Yeah, and then the question is, since she saw the future, could she have changed it? Because she saw the future. So this goes back to the whole, is time a line, or can you change it if you know it, right?
Right. This is where, Marty McFly comes in and sees his future self, and everything gets twisted. And the under the sea dance is ruined for everybody.
Yes. Very good. So I thought that was really powerful, and it really, I left that movie going, oh my God. It was, so the ending was, but you're saying, so I haven't watched it twice though. So you're saying it stands up to repeat viewings. What makes it, what do you enjoy about it most? Just the remembering the emotions you had, or sort of do you discover more every time you watch it?
I think the nuanced performances by the actors and seeing how they were able to hide the fact that it was all the future the whole time, and that, Amy Adams, truthfully, while Forrest Whitaker is great, Jeremy Renner is wonderful, everybody in this movie is great, but Amy Adams is kind of a singular presence in this movie, and I don't dislike her, but I've never specifically gravitated toward her work, and when she's on screen in this movie, you kind of just can't take your eyes off of her. Like, she plays it so well, and she was their first choice, I guess, for the actress for this movie. They rarely do movies get the person that they initially want for a role, and she is who they wanted, and she is who they got. And I can see why they wanted her for this role, because she's so good in it. Yeah,
I would agree. She definitely, I think the wrong person in that role, the movie wouldn't have worked, and she definitely nailed it. So, Crystal, you obviously love it. I really enjoyed it. Craig, what was your final thinking on Arrival?
I enjoyed it. I think it speaks a lot to the performances, like Crystal was saying, when you think about how much happens at the very end, which is the only time you know everything that's happening, and you are so emotionally invested in those last reveals. Considering the narrow time frame you have to have processed everything, I thought that really spoke volumes to the performances and to the plot and the world that they had created. It wasn't Rogue One. There wasn't a lot of thoughts.
Nothing is Rogue One.
That's true. I'm trying not to be judgmental though. There wasn't a lot blowing up except for that one Kratos C4. But it was, I enjoy like these more intellectual sci-fi stories also, and for the reasons that you guys were mentioning, that I think the best sci-fi really does that, create a lens through which we can sort of look at ourselves. And I really thought, in the end, given time to reflect, I really came to appreciate it more while I was watching it, I was, busy putting everything together. And of course, there's this big emotional crescendo at the end. And then after that, you're like, wow, that I feel almost like cheated, because that really all of a sudden, like, all the pieces came together at the end, almost out of the blue. And you're like, could it really have been that well set up that it wasn't out of the blue? But then the more I thought about it, as I was distant, in time and space, distanced from my viewing, I all the pieces start like sort of floating to the surface of your consciousness, and you realize, oh my God, that really was such a well-crafted story from beginning to end, that all the pieces kind of come together. And I think I didn't really fully appreciate all of that until maybe a few days after I had seen it, which again, I think is the hallmark of a really good story, really good storytelling and acting. Because if you think about it, when you walk out of a movie and you're like, yeah, that was awesome, and an hour later you're like, except for all those pieces that weren't awesome.
Yeah, that tends to happen.
Yeah, I think it tends to happen a lot more than this, where as your mind gets to steep in the ideas and the memories, you start to appreciate it more. And I definitely think this is one of those movies.
Agreed. It was much better than Logan. I'm just throwing that out there.
100%.
There we go.
Yes.
Well, Crystal, thank you. It was so great to chat with you here in Dunkin' Donuts and meet your little dog there and enjoy some sugary sweets with you here. And we'll see you on the main show here in a few days.
That is something I'm very much looking forward to.
Cool. As are we.
All right. Have a good evening, Crystal.
You too.
Bye. Safe journey back through the wormhole.
Right.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.